Hello, I'm Loren Sederstrom, and I'm the host of the All Around Grant Show. Some of what we've covered on the show. The Great Grant Tractor Parade and the GRP Float that has also been in several other parades, as well as some of the greenhouses in Grant, the apple orchards, some of the farm markets in Grant, pick your own blueberry fields, which we have close, some of the farms that are around, car shows that we frequent, as well as the cutter parades and so much more. So join me.
We have what I think will be an interesting show for you today. A lot of changes are coming along. They're doing a lot of things behind the scenes, and we want to share one of those with you. I'll give you a little background to begin with. For the longest time, Grant, they had a Neanderthal road policy where if you lived on the road and it had to be fixed, the people on the road had to pay for it. It wasn't like most cities where there's so much money, every taxpayer pays so much per 100,000 into the tax, and then it gets, they repair the roads. Well, in Grant, 50% of the roads are either state or county. So they're missing all that revenue from 50% of the residents. So if you live on a road that needs to be rebuilt, then they split it up. Well, they just decided to change this policy because the mayor and deputy mayor live on a main drag which is called Joliet.
And keep in mind that that road is not a state or a county road, correct?
It's a city road. But the interesting thing is, it is a feeder road for Woodland Acres that has 70 homes and Victoria Station, which has approximately 30. So what they need to do is totally rebuild that road. There are potholes 2 feet in diameter, 6 inches deep, and the road, when they patch it, it looks like it has freckles, honest to goodness. There isn't an inch along there that isn't patched. So it is just, it's over 30 years old, nothing's been done other than the seal coat, and it's literally falling apart. Well, that's going to require a rebuild, and that's going to be about $500,000. Well, the last show we did, we talked about how they obscurely changed the road policy to bundle projects. Well, but when the mayor and deputy mayor are on the road that needs to be rebuilt and it's going to cost $500,000, they don't want to pay 50 grand. They came up with a brilliant idea of changing the road policy.
Now we should back up, Mr. Sederstrom, about some of these policies when it comes to road repair and road reconstruction, is that those folks who do live on a county road or a state roadway, those roads, the funding for repairing those roads or doing reconstruction to those roads either comes from the county level if it's a county road, or comes from the state level if it is a state roadway. And typically a county or the state do not assess special assessments to the residents who live along that road, or the commercial properties or farms that are along those roads, that it comes from a fund that has been set aside specifically for the roadways of the county or the roadways of the state. And what is different with city roadways and even township roadways is that oftentimes cities or townships, municipalities, do not have a sufficient enough of roadway funding in a set-aside fund to do their road repairs or their road reconstruction because they don't put it in the budget. Now, what you were saying in the previous show is that in the city of Grant, Well, the city of Grant didn't have a budget or a fund to take care of its roads, and what they would do is they would wait until there was a petition submitted to the council of all the people and property owners on the stretch of road that would say, yes, we want this to be done, and yes, we are going to pay for it in its entirety out of our own pockets by paying for that construction, correct?
Correct.
And so this change in road policy that has now come up because the mayor and the deputy mayor, as you mentioned, their road is in such great disrepair that you could pretty much lose your car in some of the potholes. They don't want to be one of those people who has to fork all the money out of their pocket like they've expected all of the other residents in the past in the city of Grant to do for the road reconstruction, correct?
Right.
And so they've got a new policy where they're saying, oh, we've come up with this brilliant idea. Let's do special assessments and not have that special assessment only of those people living or those businesses or the property owners along that roadway, but we're going to expand it further out into a much larger area because, well, those people, they have to drive on that road too, right?
Well,
so why shouldn't they pay? And let's get those people at that, you were telling me about that one subdivision, and pull those people in,
Well,
right?
what they're doing on a sneakily basis, there's 2 points I have to make here. One, they're saying they can bundle projects, but they didn't say the projects have to be equal because seal coating is 1/10 the cost of a road reconstruct. But they're figuring if they can bundle and drag everybody together, then they can spread the big money for the reconstruction in with the seal coats and come out equal. The other interesting thing is that's very interesting is under the old position that you were talking about policy, it was 75% people had to agree.
Oh,
now
75%.
they had 72. Then they had a couple of projects. They only had 72, so they didn't go ahead and do it. Well, what was really interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, they just passed. We talked about the revised roads policy. Well, it would be down to 50%, and it was up to council discretion. We have a clip today that points out they're now going down to 35%, and I don't know when it switched from the policy they passed to what the engineer's talking about. But it's very interesting how they're manipulating these things, and things are flying under the radar. April's meeting was an hour. May's meeting was 30 minutes, and they just slam, bam, thank you, ma'am. They get her done. They put everything as they possibly can on the consent agenda, and they do not allow discussion. So you really don't know what's going on. And one of the things I have on here is they're getting the bills. Well, the legal bills have been $4,000 a month, and they have this nebulous things like prosecutions, $1,800, prosecutions, $2,000. Well, actually, it's been $1,800 a month twice, so I don't know what they're covering up. You don't know exactly what they're doing, but they're spending quite a bit on legal. So it's real nebulous. They did have one public hearing, and you had commented on it earlier, when nobody was there to comment. They had a public hearing.
Now, one question I have, Mr. Sederstrom, on this road policy that they're creating. You had mentioned that, you know, at the last news program that we did on this policy, which was only like 5 weeks ago, that they had brought that requirement of the number of signatures required on a petition from 75% down to, what was that, 50%? And that now in this short time, now it looks like it might only be 35%.
We'll have
and what I want to point out, though, is that in the city of Grant, they only have city council meetings once a month. So I think your point is well taken in asking, when did they enact a different policy since the last meeting, since that would have been a month ago? Now, the other question that I have, then maybe your clips will answer this question, but I want to pose this question in the very beginning, in that when other cities do special assessments for road reconstruction projects, it's not uncommon that they will do several different neighborhoods at the same time, so that way when they've got the guy whose company is doing that road reconstruction work is out there, it's more cost effective to be doing several projects in several neighborhoods so that they don't have to bring them out at different times during the year. And we've talked about that staging efficiency before on these shows. But what they do, because neighborhoods may have different needs for the amount of reconstruction on their roads or repair, or like you mentioned, seal coating or whatever that might be, or just putting on a light coat of the bituminous versus a total reconstruction, that they take that into account. And so that special assessment for the neighborhood that needs a total reconstruction of their street, their assessment is actually a higher amount per property unit versus those streets that only need to have a new layer put on. And so my question would be, in the city of Grant, are they going to have the same special assessment per everybody, no matter what type of construction or road reconstruction or repair is being done on the street in front of your property?
Well, we don't know that. They
Okay.
they changed it. They can do blacktopping, and they can take 3 projects and wrap them into one project. But they, again, when they passed the road policy, it was very obscure. It wasn't clear as far as what they were going to do, and so nobody knows. But let's play the first clip, and we'll talk on the other side.
The following additions to what we had proposed last month. The first one is this, the city encourages all neighborhoods within the feasibility study to participate in the project to benefit from the economy of scales of a much larger competitively bid construction project. I think that just is common sense for everybody. The other thing that we modified was the original assessment policy asked that we have 75% of the proposed units approve the project. We've modified that to 50%. The other thing that we talked about last month was putting a term year limit on the feasibility report. We talked about 3 years, and so we added that language. And then we also, as part of that, we added language that if residents come after that 3-year period, that they would be responsible for the cost of a new feasibility report. So I guess with that said, I would entertain any questions.
There we go. Yes, you see, they're reiterating the changes. Now, notice they said 50% on that. We have a clip further on that will change. So just remember that they said 50% there. Later on, it's 35.
Okay, and I think another thing I want to follow up on from our previous news program, we had discussed that issue about these feasibility studies, and that if a feasibility study has been done, and many of the feasibility studies that have been done at the cost of the residents or the property owners who had to pay for them in order to justify the fact that they wanted their own road to be repaired. And so this actually is a good a change to the policy, that if a feasibility study has been done by somebody, whether or not if it's one of the resident groups in the community, or if it is actually the local government unit, if they've done a feasibility study and the road project hasn't gone forward, that at least the feasibility study and the work that went into it and the cost that went into it, that it's still valid for 3 years, so that that road could still possibly go forward in a couple of years.
Well, the other significant change is the city will now pay for all feasibility studies. That's
Yes.
very interesting when the mayor and deputy mayor, their road is getting done. Gee whiz, let's make the feasibility study costs go away, and usually it's $3,000 to $5,000
Yes.
to do that. It's kind of interesting how self-serving that was. Well, let's go. There's also some other inaccuracies. Let's look at this next one. They're talking about the typical assessment. So if you could play that, please. We'll talk on the other side.
Between $7,500 and $8,500 for the projects that we've done in the last couple of years.
Okay.
And so most of the property values, I would say, in those neighborhoods, I don't know, exactly what they would be, but I'm guessing between $400,000 and $500,000 properties. And so that amount, I would think, would be within that range of.
I'll stop you there.
Break it down for us. Exactly what is he saying that
He's saying that
a
it's within the guidelines that, and you went through this before, you can only charge so much of the property value for enhancing, for repairing the road.
Well, that's incorrect.
But
Is that what he said?
well,
Is that what he's leading the city council to believe?
he's saying they asked him if it was within guidelines that you can't charge too much. You have to keep it within a certain level, and he's basically saying, yes, I think we're in the guidelines. If the average property is $400,000 to $500,000 and it's only $8,000 for the assessment, it would be within the proper range.
Except that is not the test. And that is why I wanted you to clarify for me what it was that he was communicating to the council. Perhaps this is the reason why they have the elevated legal fees, is because they are working on improper legal basis. In the special assessment arena, in order to charge a special assessment, that special assessment that is charged, there's two hurdles that a municipality has to overcome in order to withstand a challenge to their special assessments. First of all, it has to be constitutional, and that means that whatever their method is for determining an assessment, a special assessment, it has to be within the realm of what is required under the state of Minnesota Constitution. So they can't just say an arbitrary number. They can't say, well, if a property is valued at $400,000, that we can charge 1% as our special assessment, because you see, that is not a basis for what the law requires. They also cannot say we're going to charge a flat fee on everybody just as a matter of policy. And you see, that's where the city of Maplewood fell into a quagmire with their special assessment, in that they had a special assessment where they said, we are just going to charge a flat fee to all properties of this type or that type or some other type, a straight flat fee. And that, of course, is not constitutional either. It has to be related to the special benefit analysis that's required in Minnesota. That whatever work is being done to that road, it has to confer a special benefit to that property. And under case law, what that means is that it has increased that property value, market value, by that amount. So if the city of Grant cannot prove that their $8,000 assessment is equivalent to each of those properties increasing in market value by $8,000 as a result of that road reconstruction work in front of their property, they are not in compliance with state law. When he says, oh, we're within these boundaries that is based upon the value of the property, not necessarily. It's based upon, did that work increase the market value of that property?
Well, let's go on. Let's play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Under the procedures page here on D, all the way down at the bottom, the city council reserves the right to approve or disapprove of any project in accordance with the best interests of the citizens of the city of Grant. That's always been there, okay? We can order these projects. That is within our power to order these projects. The 50%, for me, from my perspective, because Brad can't really answer what Tom was saying here. Tom's addressing the council and fairly. He's got a concern about this 50%, that there could be some blowback on it, there could be some problems with it.
Now, again, they're throwing the 50% out. Again, within their policy, they reserve the right, the city council ultimately has the power to decide if they go ahead with the project or not, no matter what the percentage is. So they've kind of slipped that in at the bottom, but it's kind of interesting because before there was a road that they wanted to repair and they only got 72%. And it went south after the people had paid the $3,000 to $5,000 to have the study done. And it's a terrible road. It's along the Gateway Trail. It gets used a lot. It's a dirt road. They wanted it repaired, and it didn't work. So that's kind of interesting. And the next clip we're going to talk about is the mayor Flame admits that the roads are beat up. When I was on the council for 4 years, I was saying we have to get these roads repaired. Otherwise, we're going to be like Afton, and the roads are going to get so bad that all of a sudden they have to go out and bond and have millions of dollars in bonds to fix all the roads at once. And he will allude to that a little bit later in here, another clip where some cities have reached their limit and can't bond anymore to fix the roads because they've maxed it out. But let's play the next clip.
That was on a road that was rated over like a 7 or 8 on our rating scale. I mean, we're seeing these at 5 and 6, aren't we?
Right.
I mean, we're seeing these beat up. You look at Joliet, you look at some of these other roads, it's plain common sense. You don't need an engineer to go out and look at Joliet and know what needs to be done. It's just that simple. You can just look at it. I mean, my wife tells me all the time how much she looks at it. I get
Well, you go down Joliet, and this spring has got really, you have to drive down the middle of the road and weave back and forth to avoid, we're not talking little potholes, we're talking significant potholes that are 2 feet in diameter and 6 inches deep. And we're not just talking every once in a while. You'll see a whole section of road, like I said, the road looks like it's got a case of freckles, except they're potholes. And they just finally recently went out and did some patching. And there's more patching, you can see more patching than you can see road. And it's kind of like, it is really kind of a waste that they're, and just like McCusick, when I was on the council, with the first year or so I was on there, Phil Olson, the old engineer, we came up with a plan to fix McCusick Road, the shortcut that goes by the Gost House, for $135,000, just patch it and do an overlay. Well, when they went to the citizens, they told them it was going to be $450 for a reconstruct, and they never even mentioned it. So obviously it didn't get done. At one time, Huber had said, well, we can just turn it into a cul-de-sac and not let it go through anymore. So it's really interesting how Neanderthal some of these things these people come up with. But
and I think it's important to mention to our viewers, because maybe all of our viewers may not be longtime viewers of the news program. Carr, who is now the deputy mayor, before he was deputy mayor, he was actually the mayor
for 10 years
on the council. So he is very knowledgeable about the history of the roads in the city of Grant and the issues that have been struggled with by the community. And Huber, who is now the mayor, he was, before mayor, he was on the council as a council member. So he also is not a newcomer to the game. You might say if somebody were a newcomer to the game that, well, you know, maybe they're just not that familiar with what the issues might be, what the needs are of the community, different ideas that have been discussed over the years. But these two gentlemen who control and really dominate the council, they have all that knowledge in their back pocket.
Well, it's interesting. 9 or 10 years ago, when Carr, well, it was a little bit longer than that, when Carr became mayor, there was a $500,000 fund set up for road repair. He decided it wasn't needed and then drastically gave everybody a tax reduction the following year. Now, we only pay about 4 cents of every tax dollar that goes to the city, so we're extremely low, one of the lowest ones around. Nobody pays anything for local taxes. And it's not a poor community. Like I say, the average home is $400,000 to $500,000. So it's a highly professional community. And so there is money out there. But he is this, ultra conservative, don't fix the roads, let the people pay for it themselves. Now, he lives in two acres off Joliet. Everybody else has more than that. He's in a planned unit development that they no longer allow. Everybody else is 10 acres. Well, if you're paying for the 10 acres that you're in front of as opposed to the 2 acres, there's a little bit difference in price there. And if you have 40 acres or over like I do, you're talking, that's some serious money.
And I think it's ironic, and especially for our viewers who don't know where the mayor and the deputy mayor live. They actually live side by side.
And share
to
a
each
driveway.
other. And
No less.
That's right, and share a driveway. So you've got two guys who are creating the road policy for the city of Grant who share a driveway. Now my question, now this is only on a personal note, is who plows their driveway? Do they share that cost?
Well, go to a Y.
Right, or do they wait until the other one has run over it enough to do that maintenance, or do they share it? So you see, what is their road philosophy when it comes to their own shared drive?
Well, let's play the next clip. It's just a short one. And it's one of the things I was saying for 4 years, and now, gee whiz, the new mayor is finally spitting it out. So let's play the clip.
Fiscal cliff. We're going to come up this big hill, and then all of a sudden there's going to be all these roads at just horrid ratings, and we're going to have to do something. And some of our neighboring cities are actually reached their bonding limit. I don't know if you know that, but some of our neighboring cities can't borrow any more money because they've reached that type of a hill, and then they had to borrow a bunch of money. Now there's no more money to borrow. They're at their limit. We've got to start this process. So that's my answer to that. Denny, I'm sorry I took all your time.
Well, isn't that interesting? What has changed since last year that all of a sudden, oh, the sky is falling? When I was on the council, and consistently the 4 years through, I was talking roads for the last, in 2017, when they sent the 2018 budget, I had made the motion to increase our levy $25 per 100,000 to pay for road repair because the roads were so bad. And if you drove down Joliet now, you would, well, they repaired it now, but before they repaired it, it was unbelievably bad. I mean, there was not a 20-foot section that did not have 3 or 4 potholes in it. It was just unbelievable.
Now, most municipalities, and I'm drawing from my experience in Maplewood, most municipalities, they use a combination of funding sources for their road reconstruction work or for those road repair jobs where they need to do a mill and overlay, or that they need to do the seal coating to give longevity to the work that they've already done. And those sources of revenue can be, of course, the special assessment that we've already talked about, where they have a special assessment levied against the properties that are in that project area. And of course, as I indicated, there has to be, in order for that special assessment to hold up in a court of law, if it's challenged, it has to be constitutional, and then the amount has to be equivalent to the special benefit that is conferred upon the property that is equivalent to the increase in market value the property has derived from the fact that the road has been reconstructed or repaired or somehow improved. Now, that's one source of funding. Another source of funding is that, say for instance, if that road is got a particular designation, they may qualify for funding from, say for instance, a state fund. Or like some communities like Maplewood, they have an assessment for their electrical franchise tax, which is an assessment that goes into a specialized fund, which oftentimes is tapped into to repair roads. Or the sanitary sewer fund, another specialty fund of fees and taxes that are assessed upon people throughout the whole entire city that is then tapped into when road projects are done. Or certainly cities might look ahead and say, we need to set money aside from our general funds that we collect every year from the property taxes. So those are some of the areas that funds can come from for these road reconstruction projects. And of course, there are other areas that funds can come from as well, just depending upon the community and the public policy that they've put together and how they've designed their structuring and their fee structure of where they collect all the different monies to go into those road projects that they need to do, because that is an essential service that a local municipality provides to their residents, is good, safe roads. I mean, that's where their governmental dollars should be going into, that and public safety, and I think that's what most people believe are the duties and obligations of their municipalities, is to provide them good, safe roadways, good public safety, and to provide for those roadways to be cleared off when there's snow or rain, or keep them in good repair.
Well, let's go to the next clip. We're going to talk about 2019, 2019-12, their roads policies.
Adequacy of petition and ordering preparation of report. At this point, we have neighborhoods that have prepared petitions in order to study the ordering of an actual road project. That is what this does not do, is order any road projects. It simply prompts us to prepare studies for the study of the road projects. With that said, Brad, I'm going to turn to you.
He made that so crystal clear that it's there's to study. Now, they just changed it so the city is paying for the study, but they are bundling several of them together, and in the next clip, they will go over exactly which ones they're bundling. And the next clip is also the one you got to listen for the 35%.
Right. So before we get to that next clip, let me be clear on what he was saying there. That he's saying that they have already now received petitions from neighborhoods asking for feasibility studies to be completed by the city of Grant with regard to the roads in their neighborhood.
That's right.
Okay, very good. Well, let's take a look at that clip.
The adequacy of a petition ordering a preparation of a feasibility report. As you know, several petitions were received from several property owners requesting a feasibility study be completed for roadway improvements along the following streets. We have Gennaro Court North, Justin Trail North from Delwood to Joliet, Grenleff Avenue North, the Woodland Acres area, which included Jody Avenue and Jody Avenue Court, 103rd Street and 103rd Street Court, Juneau Avenue North, part of Joliet North from 101st Street North to the end of the pavement, 101st Street North, and then Kelman Court, which is mistakenly identified on the map as Highview Road North. And we will definitely get that fixed before assessments. So, and then the other street here was Joliet North, south of 101st Street down to Delwood Road. So the signed petitions account for 81 of the 152 residents of the area, and that accounts for 53% of the property owners within the project limits, which exceeds the 35% needed for the city to authorize the city engineer to prepare a feasibility report, which is the first step in the procedures per the city's current assessment policy. So with that said, I guess.
You notice the 35% came in there in the end?
Right.
How the change, where did that come from?
Now, the thing is that, of course, he could have misspoke. Obviously, he could have accidentally said 35%, but did any of the people on the council, and there's 5 of them there,
He was not correct.
They've all got a packet. They all know the policy. It's right before them. Okay, so you're saying not one of the 5 council members questioned that number?
Not at all. It was not corrected.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this comes out. Going to come interesting to see they come out with the road studies. Joliet is the oldest street, and it's probably was put in the 70s, and it has not been really overlaid. Well, there's one section of overlay that's one half of the road. It's 300 feet long, and it's in front of the mayor and deputy mayor's house. That is the only section of the road, the east lane going north, the 300 feet that does not have a chip in it. Everything up to there and alongside of it and past there is, like I said, you could drive down that road and there are more patches than there is original asphalt. It's really interesting. It actually, you know, it's artistic almost, the shapes they've created. So that kind of completes the road end.
Well, we'll have to keep our eye on this news story as it progresses, because it sounds like they're going to be doing these feasibility studies, and then somewhere along the way they're going to have to grapple with that issue of how much are they going to charge for special assessments, and what will the basis of those special assessments be. And when I'm looking at this, I'm going to be looking at it with a very careful eye to what is required under the state constitution and under the state law and case law. So, Mr. Sederstrom, what else is on the agenda for your news stories today?
Well, the one thing I want to add is they have a $1.1 million budget surplus, not surplus, but in the bank. So in other words, they have enough money to fund next year's council all year if they don't get another dime in taxes. So it isn't like the money isn't there. So they could actually pay for it themselves and bond. There's a number of things that they could do if they wanted, but it's the wind seems to be shifting. Now what we're going to talk.
So you're saying you don't think they're going to do special assessments this year, but they could potentially do them in the future since they don't have a policy regarding special assessments.
Well, yeah, you're right. But what I'm saying is they run through the budget's 1.1 million a year roughly. That's what they have in reserves. So they have enough money in reserves to go a whole nother year, and they could. So if they had to fix it, put $500,000 into a road, they would have enough to do it, and then they could just bond for it. They charge the people 5% interest on if you put your assessments on your taxes and pay for it in 10 years.
Right, that's if they charge a special assessment, that's correct. And if you don't
And if you put your money in the bank,
Yeah.
you get 0.5%. So they're actually making money on the residents. But what we're going to shift gears to, we're going to talk about the comprehensive plan. When we were on the council, Larry and myself, we wanted to start being proactive and have a citizen committee help develop the comprehensive plan. So if you could play that clip 575, we'll talk on the other side.
All right. Recently, the council majority has denied use of town hall for the Charter Commission to have its meetings, a commission that the city majority petitioned the district court to form. They have denied use to the grant restoration project to form a certified, a CERT team, which is a certified emergency response team. So they've denied use for that in conjunction with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. They've denied the Citizens Grant to form a road committee and meet in our building. They've denied the Citizens Grant to address a Valley Branch flooding recently and meet in our own town hall. And just as recent as last month, they've denied the grant restoration project to discuss, review, and offer input into our comprehensive plan. So as you can see, it's not so much about can we or can't we, because obviously your policy allows two groups to do that. As our attorney said, it's an issue having somebody come in and open the building. Well, I've talked to the people at the Woodland Acres, and really it's not an issue. You've got a 4-digit code. You give them the code. You don't drive here to open up the building. It's that simple. If the issue is that we have video equipment up here, then I recommend that the city take out Comcast video equipment and buy its own video equipment. Truth of the matter is, we're not really worried about whether the video equipment is going to come and steal it from the same group that's going to be asking for use of the building. And if it were to be, I believe it would be insured, or it should be at that point. So
The clip that we just showed, now that was from how long ago?
February 2017.
Okay, and so that was certainly documentation that there has been many different groups within the community for the community good and purposes that are about projects and information important to the municipality where they want to meet at City Hall. One being to talk about the comprehensive plan, because every community that is in this metropolitan area has to put together every 10 years an amendment or review or their new comprehensive plan that, and then submit it to the Metropolitan Council. So certainly this is a valid request of this resident group to say we'd like to meet and form and come together and look at the comprehensive plan and do that in City Hall. That makes a lot of sense to me. And so what you're saying is that that policy since 2017 hasn't changed through today.
No, it
that
hasn't.
This council has still not formed a resident committee to look at and talk about the changes that are appropriate for the comprehensive plan 2020 that must be submitted to the Metropolitan Council within a matter of months.
That's correct. One of the things that came out in the meeting, and I don't know if I put it on a clip, but they did have a workshop that was unannounced between the Planning Commission and the City Council to talk about the Planning Commission and to talk about the comprehensive plan, and the planner did extensive work on it. There hasn't been many significant changes, but no one knows because no one can see it. It's not out yet. They're talking about putting it out on the website, and after they submit it to the Met Council, then the residents are going to be able to comment on it. But that's kind of after the fact. That's like locking the barn after the horse is out, you know? We should have some input from citizens, and strategically right down the road, they have been discouraging citizen input. If you look, no one shows up at the meetings anymore. I mean, there's 2 or 3 people. There's one little old lady that sits and knits. There's 2 of their bozos, Bob Tufte and Jerry Helander. They're sitting in the back, cheering them on. And basically, they don't want anybody there. They don't want, you know, and the other interesting thing is, when they have a comment section, it isn't at the City Council. When they're talking about something, oh, well, if you wanted to comment, you should have went to the Planning Commission. And I've been watching diligently in the White Bear Press, which is our legal newspaper. They have not put anything about a comprehensive plan or a comprehensive plan review in there.
And the thing that it should be noted that when a council is telling the residents of the community, you know, if you've got something to say about what's going on in our community, you have to give those comments to the Planning Commission. Keep in mind, the Planning Commission is not a body who can make decisions and enact what is going to happen in the community. They only are recommenders of what action the council should take. And so when you go to the Planning Commission, while it's well and good to tell your community representatives that are on the Planning Commission how you feel, they actually are only making recommendations to the council. They are not the decision makers. And I think most people realize that when you want to get something done, that you really bring your ideas and your grievances and your proposals to the decision maker. Isn't that what we're all taught? You don't go talk to somebody who's at the bottom of the totem pole. You go and you talk to the decision makers, because that's who's got the power to make the change.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. They're limiting public participation. It's not logical. Most people, and I've seen it happen many times, they go to the meeting to talk to a public meeting, they put it on the agenda, whatever it is, where it's hockey arena or whatever it is, to make comments, and the mayor says, nope, your time to make a comment was at the Planning Commission. Well, the city council doesn't review the planning commission, so they don't know what the public comment is made. They have no clue, they have no input from the public, and then they're putting space between themselves and the public. They don't want public input. It's behind closed doors, keep everything hidden.
Yep, and here's another good example from another community as to why it is so important for the residents and the business owners, the property owners, then even renters to know what is going on in their community. And especially when it comes to this comprehensive plan and putting it together, because that's the plan that guides a community for the next 10 years. And if there's something in there that changes something drastically for the next 10 years, your next time to be able to change that isn't for 10 years, and by that time, you probably won't be able to change it. So here's an example. Say, for instance, in the city of Maplewood, there is a particular neighborhood called the Gladstone community, where the neighborhood came together, helped put together a neighborhood plan, and it was decided that in a particular area that would be allowed to have high-density housing, but that high-density housing would only be 3 stories high buildings, and that the density would be restricted to 26 units per acre. Now, that sounds like a lot, but that's what was decided. Well, Maplewood City Council, because they have much the same attitude as what we're seeing here in the city of Grant, is that they have enacted and made changes to the comprehensive plan for that neighborhood in Maplewood, that now the buildings can be 4 stories tall, and the density has been changed to 50 units per acre. That's substantial. And the people in that community don't even know that that is the change that's been made for their neighborhood and will govern their neighborhood for the next 10 years.
Well, what you see, what both Maplewood and Grant subscribe to, is called the mushroom principle.
Yes.
You keep them in the dark and feed them manure, and that's the way it works. Let's see what they have to say about the comp plan on this next clip.
Okay, and this is from the last council meeting,
Yep.
correct?
Things like that do not trip it, and we are free to do that as we go through this next review period. Once that period closes, we are required to hold a public hearing on the document. So once we incorporate the changes that we need to, whether there's changes from this body or the Planning Commission that need to be made, we complete a full copy or a full draft of it, if you will, goes to the public hearing. Public has the opportunity to provide their formal comments as well. The document will be available from the city's website, so if folks want to take a look at it from the city, from a resident perspective, and provide any comments, they can certainly submit those electronically to us over the next 6 months. But we will have the public hearing. If we need to address or incorporate any of their changes, those get added into it. Then a full draft hopefully is recommended to you from the Planning Commission, and then you take formal action on it.
Basically, they're saying, after it's all done, we'll let you look at it.
Yes.
You don't have any input as you're going in there. To me, it makes sense to have the input and the foundation, so if you have to make a substantial change.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point there, Mr. Sederstrom, in that if it's something minor, a tiny thing like, oh, you know, what type of signage that we're going to allow in our community in the next 10 years, that kind of thing, or that we have a commitment to recycling, those kinds of things. Well, okay, they'll probably make those adjustments because that is not going to affect the overall plan. But as in the case of Maplewood, where they changed that density from 26 units per acre to 50 units per acre, do you think after getting a few comments from the neighborhood, they're going to actually go back on their big master design and how they've reworked the whole neighborhood after months and months of hiring planners to come up with all these big dreams? Do you think they're really going to change it?
No.
And it's the same way in the city of Grant. If there's some substantial change, whether or not it has to do with what that minimum acreage is, or what can be allowed with regard to sewer or water coming into the community, if people aren't looking at it now and those things get in there, during that comment period, they're not going to take those things out. They're just not, because it's already been incorporated into some master plan that somebody has already put into motion.
Well, we're going to shift now to the MS4 reports, and as most people know, you have to say what you're doing with the water. And I'm sure at Maplewood they had MS4 reports.
Oh, yes.
And kind of give us an example of how they would do an MS4 report.
Well, typically they would have, you know, the professionals put together the data that was required, and then they would give an extended presentation to the council that would be cable cast, so that the community could be watching and hear all about what the report had to say and what are the impaired waters, what is Maplewood doing to perhaps in the long term address some of these issues, what are some of the policies we should undertake, whatever those might be. And then it would be then open, and the council could ask questions, which generally there'd be very few questions, but at least it was an extended presentation so that the community would be able to hear and be aware of what this report had to say.
Well, let's watch the next clip, because this is the unique way that Grant does their MS4 report.
Our clerk was here, and she was handing out information on our water plan, our MS4 water plan. Talked about that along with Washington County Conservation District, who was here talking to residents about that. And I loaded a couple of dump.
This was at the city cleanup on a Saturday. The clerk is there. If anybody that comes up and asks her, she'll give them a handout, a piece of paper that talks about the MS4. That is how they handle it at a city cleanup. So I just thought that was rather interesting.
So this was on a he was at the meeting, was announcing that this is
It wasn't, no, you understand. This was the city cleanup where when the Grand Restoration Project did it, they cleaned the ditches.
Yes.
They put it in the newsletter, which I have right here, that, oh, you can clean your garages out. So people were lined up to get free dumpsters, and the clerk walked around handing out leaflets on the MS4. There was no meeting, there was no explanation. They were just there eating hot dogs and passing out leaflets if somebody asked for them. But I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, my goodness. So then, in essence, nobody even knew what was being handed out or why. And it wasn't being cable cast to the community like the council meetings, and a part of the council meeting where even the council members can listen to the presentation and become informed as well.
Yeah, this was kind of Hicksville. But let's go to the next video with Bob Detmer, where we have the Minnesota Legislature, it's Senate File 2884. It's No School on a Dump Site. Minnesota is Wildwood became the Dirty Dozen, the 12th school within the state of Minnesota that's been built in a hazardous waste site, and they used it to industrial standards. You couldn't build a house where Wildwood was built, but they called it, because the school meets industrial standards, so they can have 10 times more pollution than you would have if you had a house built there. And we're sending kids there with immune systems that aren't fully developed. And they've already sent 53 kids have left Wildwood. The parents pulled them because nosebleeds and headaches. And 2 teachers have got cancer. And what we're trying to do is get a notification process that what would happen is every year in the parents' newsletter would say, these schools are built on former dump sites. To be aware so you can make an intelligent decision. So here's Bob Detmer at the legislature. We'll play that clip and talk on the other side.
Is it intended to provide parents with the security of knowing that their child attends a safe school and free students from those that are dangerous? However, many schools are not free of chemicals that pose invisible threats to the health of our staff and students. Increasingly, schools are strapped for much-needed funds for when they come to constructing of new schools and new buildings. And astonishingly, building schools on contaminated land is generally illegal. My investigation of this issue, we found that only 5 states around the country prohibit or restricting siting schools near hazardous or toxic waste sites. Only 5 states have anything on the books. The community groups featured in case studies showed were shocked to find that their state had no laws or regulations that prohibited a school from building them on toxic soil. To truly protect the health of our nation's children and to halt the reckless trend, we should be calling for local and state and federal legislators to pass laws that will prohibit future schools from being built near contaminated land in their communities.
That's what this bill is about, the state legislature. It's just been jacketed in the House of Representatives, so it will be taken up next fall in the session. I think Minnesota's in the top 3 places that have schools and dump sites. California is the worst. You would think down south, like Alabama, Missouri, there'd be more cases down there, but there isn't. And I think it's a travesty to build a school on a dump site and have the children exposed to that, because especially like with the Wildwood, the immune systems of these kindergarten through 5th graders or 3rd graders aren't fully developed, and it puts them at great risk. And why I don't understand why all it would take is one sentence in the annual parents newsletter where they have to comment on pesticides, herbicides, mold, those types of things. And air quality, that's required by state law. They would have to add a sentence, these buildings were on former dump sites. It would cost nothing. And we've been at it for 4 years trying to get it through the legislature just to create a notification. Not having them tear the buildings down, but just notify parents so they can make an intelligent decision regarding their children's health, safety, and welfare.
Right. And the other collateral issue with regard to the Wildwood School and where it's built is that there is a conditional use permit that allowed it to be built there and to be built on top of this site. And that there are certain conditions of that conditional use permit that, from the last that I have heard, are not being adhered to. And the enforcer of those conditions under the CUP is the Grant City Council. They are the enforcer. So they are the body that should call up this conditional use permit and say, are all these conditions being met for that school to have been built there? Because without that conditional use permit, that school could not have been built there. And I know that you've talked about some of those conditions in the past being certain tests and reports that have to be generated on a periodic basis so that the public is aware of what types of residue is being collected in the testing pipes that are there, and also the reports that have to be generated that the public would be able to have access to that knowledge. But from the last that I had heard, these reports aren't being generated and the testing is not being completed. Well, that is at the feet of the Grant City Council for not being the enforcers of the conditional use permit that they granted. Well, they're totally ignoring it. Now they're going ahead and putting a hockey arena, or attempting to, on a dump site, and they required the environmental assessment worksheet done by Bay West said they should do an environmental impact statement, and they're not doing that either. They changed consultants. So anyway, I'll bring you up to date next month, let you know what else we're having in an all-around grant. Again, they basically let the school get away with murder. They don't follow the testing. They're allowing them to build a hockey arena, and there's a restrictive covenant in the deed that says nothing can be built there. They take a blind eye. Whatever the school wants is what they get. So until next time, I'll bring you up to date, and we'll see what's going on all around Grant.
The following additions to what we had proposed last month. The first one is this, the city encourages all neighborhoods within the feasibility study to participate in the project to benefit from the economy of scales of a much larger competitively bid construction project. I think that just is common sense for everybody. The other thing that we modified was the initial, or the original assessment policy asked that we have 75% of the proposed units approve the project. We've modified that to 50%. The other thing that we talked about last month was putting a term year limit on the feasibility report. We talked about 3 years, and so we added that language. And then we also, as part of that, we added language that if residents come after that 3-year period, that they would be responsible for the cost of a new feasibility report. So I guess with that said, I'm between $7,500 and $8,500 for the projects that we've done in the last couple of years.
Okay.
And so most of the property values, I would say, in those neighborhoods, I don't know, exactly what they would be, but I'm guessing between $400,000 and $500,000 properties. And so that amount, I would think, would